Welcome to Social Capital Expert, a show where we discover the value of social capital and how cultivating strategic relationships is critical to our success. In each episode, your host, Sarah Frances McDaniel, will explore the stories of fascinating people from all over the world to better understand how their ability to build relationships has led to their success. We will uncover tips, tricks, and practical ways that you too can become a social capital expert. Hi, and welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have our special guest, Kate Bailey. Kate, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. Excited about it.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you here. And you have so much going on. But before we get to what you're doing today, can you give us a little bit of background and kind of introduce yourself to us? Maybe tell us where you're from and sort of where you started.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of in a nutshell, I'm a kid. I'm from Wyoming originally. Grew up in a small town in Wyoming and moved to Colorado about 25 years ago for college. I was a writer. I was kind of this idealist. I wanted to be a magazine writer and went to undergrad for history. I have a master's degree in history as well, and it was always kind of with this idea of becoming a journalist, which I did early in my career. I started out in the magazine industry as I wanted to, made my way up at a pretty early age to editor-in-chief of a local design publication in Denver called Colorado Homes and Lifestyles when I was 27 years old. And by the time I was 30, I was burned out already on the industry. I was up in Aspen and I was working at Aspen Magazine as the managing editor when the recession started in 2007, 2008, and was laid off like a lot of other people in the magazine industry. It was just that huge transition time in kind of where communications was going, where media was going. Blogs had started and sort of social media had started. And so I think that kind of what I recognized at that point when I got laid off was, well, is this really something that feels sustainable to me? Because it was definitely a big transition period. And so I actually decided, I had a friend that was in public relations and she was like, you'd make a really great PR person. You should give that a shot, just because it's a different, it's similar industry, but definitely a different side of it. And so started working as a freelance public relations person in 2008, right after I got laid off, and really just kind of figured it out. I mean, I didn't have a ton of formal training around it, but started to work for some nonprofits, and then ultimately actually got connected with some advertising agencies as a freelance copywriter, and that was about 2010. And what I found in that time period was that I actually really loved the business side of things. And so one of the agencies that I worked for, this is, right when Facebook marketing started taking off, content marketing, blogging, things like that. And, he just said to me, he was like, look, you're a great storyteller. You understand media. It's basically the same thing. It's just kind of transferring the concept of magazine editorial to a brand instead. And so these brands are kind of, they kind of have their own publications, if you will, through their blogs, et cetera, et cetera. So set up their social media department, and then, just got curious about business, and had a great mentor who mentored me to open my agency, which I did about 5 years ago. So now I have Annabel Media, which is what we call a communications management agency. So we kind of manage all of the communications ecosystem for small businesses, mostly in the design industry, but also sort of luxury lifestyle level, really trying to tell those authentic stories across all of the different platforms. Communications is so complicated today. I think a lot of brands have a hard time sort of understanding how to bring those stories together across all these different platforms. And so that's really what we do. I think that along the way, I would say, all of the relationships that you sort of develop over the time of the first sort of decade of your career. I think, it's kind of funny. I look at the intersectionality of all the different things that I did at the magazine, but also, I lived in Aspen and I lived in Denver, and I kind of had this wide network of people that were really between graphic designers and advertising people and the design industry, and sort of looking at how all of that ultimately ended up coming together when I started my business. That was kind of those were the people that I reached out to when I finally launched. And I think that that's kind of been one of the really cool things about being in this community for so long, is knowing people and really deeply understanding sort of this industry and what people want was the thing that really made us successful. So.
That's awesome. And thank you for sharing that. Now, when you made this transition, I mean, I didn't realize that you were the editor of Colorado Homes and Lifestyles when you were that young. I mean, oh my gosh. Yeah, that's amazing and quite the achievement. So in all of kind of your journey, it sounds like there's been a real blend of digital and sort of traditional marketing, as well as more relationship marketing as well. Can you tell us sort of how you see some of that integrating together, or how you do that in your current Annabel Media business?
Absolutely. One of the things that I think is so interesting is that, when clients come to us, a lot of times they sort of see digital as being this golden nugget, right? Where, oh, well, if I'm just my website can be found on SEO and we have a great social media and we have a good story and we have a good website, then clients will come to me, right? And what we really try to say to them is that that's not actually the case. That it is still, in this world, no matter how digital it gets, the analog world is still one of the most important pieces of people's business. And we sort of see it as a three-pronged approach, effectively, that you have your digital communications and you do have to tell that story, and you have to have you have to have that unique conversation with people online that's going to distinguish you from your competition, right? So that's kind of the digital ecosystem piece. Make it, easy to navigate, pleasant to look at.
Right.
Don't sell too much. Don't shout at people. Tell your story. The second piece, and we still really do believe in traditional kind of marketing techniques, whether it's, newsletters I consider somewhat traditional because people used to mail them, but now they email them. Right. But I do think that those kind of regular touch points with your customers, getting in your inbox every month or so, just kind of keeping your brand in front of them, but sharing relevant content, sharing things that people want to know about, not selling product, but really kind of sharing knowledge. And so I think that, really, even mailers these days are more widely read than they used to be because people don't get as much junk mail. Traditional advertising, I think, still very much has its place. People are still reading magazines, whether they read them digitally or read them physically. So we really do believe that is a second, that second prong is still really important. And the third one, which to me is the most neglected by most business owners today, is that relationship piece. And I think that one of the things that we all need to sort of shift back to is not just relying on these digital pieces, but also really understanding that those relationships, those kind of business development conversations, getting out, meeting people, networking, nothing's going to replace that. Right. And so, I have a great story of a client who shall remain nameless, but she's an interior designer in town and so talented, but very much an introvert, right? And when we started working with her, I tried to explain to her, I was like, you're gonna have to get out of your world and meet people and get to know people, because that is the only way that they're gonna even know who you are or what you're about. And people tend to hire people. I mean, especially in the service-based industries, you could be the best at what you do, but if people don't like you, then they're not going to hire you. Right. And so, and it's been about 3 years of working with her kind of off and on. We did all of her digital stuff. We've done a lot of public relations for her, gotten her published. And we established this online journal that she's going to be launching with this idea of, how can I get her to feel comfortable talking to people and going out and meeting new people? And so we established this online magazine for her because she's a great writer. And she is now, because she wants to launch this magazine, she has to go out and talk to people and interview them and ask them for submissions. And all of a sudden she's started to do this. And she came to me the other day and she was like, now I get it. I understand why you had me do this, because it's as her marketing machine, what it's doing is it's this cool online journal, kind of online magazine, where she gets to talk about her design philosophy and her ideas, but she also has to go out and get people to write things for her. And so she's been reaching out to real estate people and architects, and through this has started to develop these relationships that she would have never have done otherwise if she didn't have this kind of online magazine as her reason to call them and talk to them. And so that's really what we try to do, is figure out how can clients sort of have this feeling of authenticity around their business development and around their relationship building. We have another client up in Aspen who really wants to connect with realtors. So we've devised a blog idea that is a real estate guide to Aspen, where the owner of the company has to contact real estate agents to get their opinions and get their ideas for this real estate guide to Aspen. Well, what that's doing is it's opening the door to another conversation. And it's not a sales pitch, and it's not a business development pitch. It's actually calling and saying, hey, I'd like to get your quote for this story. And so that's really what we try to do with our clients, is try to kind of help them build something that feels authentic to them, that gives them the opportunity to go out and do those sort of sales and business development calls without it feeling like a sales or business development call.
That's so awesome, and such a creative way of doing it. I think you're so right. I joke sometimes that it's like I'm the queen of the Trojan horse. Because,
yes, exactly.
you know what I mean? It's like I laugh about it, but it's really true. It's about figuring out how you can provide value to the people that you want to have as customers without ever bringing up your sales pitch or your service or goods or whatever, until you've already built some trust, and until you've come to them and made their life easier, and done something of value for them. Then it's like, I joke, but it's like they can't help but ask me what I need. Because once they realize that their needs are being met, or I'm fulfilling something of value for them, it's this really cool way of doing it. But I joke that it's like I'm the queen of the Trojan horse, and that's kind of like what you're doing. You're helping people identify a way to bring value while still creating the opportunity for them to get what they're looking for out of it as well.
Absolutely. And I think that it's different for everybody, I mean, we really try to dive into, especially the clients that tend to be more introverted. There's a lot of people that just aren't salespeople. I mean, we've never, at Annabel Media, we've never done a formal sales, marketing, or business development campaign. It has always been, word of mouth referral. It's been us kind of saying, hey, let us help out with this. Let's do this. Let's do that. And, I started my business by giving 3 clients free services for 3 months. And then I said at the end of that, if you feel like this was worth it, then this is what the price is for a retainer. And, I think that you don't have to quite go to those extremes, but I mean, when you're starting out, particularly, I think that that's one of the more important things, is really finding people that you can just say, hey, let me do some complimentary work. Let me do some work for 50% discount, whatever that is, because it is about establishing that trust, about establishing those relationships, and going above and beyond. I mean, I think that, like, to me, the relationship conversation is always that idea of 1 or 2 steps above and beyond what you think you should have to do. And that goes so far in this world. I mean, I think that we're kind of living in this atmosphere where there's very much sort of what's in it for me is always the conversation. And I think that when you can approach your relationships without that conversation of what's in it for me, and really authentically try to just be good to your brother, right? And do the right thing and go above and beyond. That goes so far in the conversation around social capital, because it is so rare anymore.
You're right. And, and I think that's a great lead in to sort of, I'd love to know what you believe the key ingredients are to creating social capital.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that, above and beyond every time. I think another big piece of this is just doing things that you're uncomfortable, that make you slightly uncomfortable, going to events that you're like, I really don't feel. I mean, every time that I have gone to an event that I'm like, oh, I'm tired, I don't want to go, or oh, this seems like it could be kind of boring, or I always end up meeting somebody that is interesting, right? And it may not be somebody that moves my business needle tomorrow, but it could in 5 or 10 years. And I think that one of the things, this great book that I'm reading that I recommend to everybody that is a business owner or is kind of entrenched in a business, it's called The Messy Middle. Oh. And it's this really wonderful, I think it was written by the guy that started the Behance network. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it is a dynamite book for anybody that deals with those daily struggles of entrepreneurship, business ownership, even really business development, and trying to grow businesses, right? But what he says is, the most successful companies have the long-term view. It's not about what can this person do for me right now. It's about this person and having a relationship with them that could turn into something 10 years from now. I mean, I've got relationships with people that I've been talking to for 3 years about marketing, and all of a sudden one day they call us and they say, hey, we're ready to go. Yeah. And so I think that not approaching your relationships with people, not approaching those sales calls as business development calls with the idea, what can you do for me tomorrow? Or I want you to become a client now. But really understanding those long-term relationships is something that I think is a piece that we all really need to get back into the habit of. It's kind of the old school way of doing things, but I really think that with how prolific digital has become, it's those personal relationships that are becoming more valuable than ever before. So yeah, I think, what did I say? I said the value of relationships, long-term relationships, definitely getting outside of your comfort zone, going and doing things that you wouldn't normally do, and really just going above and beyond when you do promise to do something for somebody, do it, and then go one or two steps above that.
That's awesome. And you and we've known each other for 7 or 8 years now. Yeah. And our paths crossed and kind of overlap in different things. I didn't see you for a couple of years. Then all of a sudden something happened, and either we were connected, and then I saw you over and over again. Yep. It's fun to just watch in that, like you said, just watching how those relationships can grow and what comes from them. And then being able to see each other develop and grow in our own places, and watching the potential for overlap there as well. I'm so thankful that you were willing to come on this show with me. And you've just been an inspiration. Your ability to connect with people, engage people into what you have going on, really create excitement and enthusiasm. I mean, it's clear that you're passionate about what you do and how you help people. Can you tell us a little bit about where you think maybe your passion comes from?
Oh my goodness. I think I just was born with a ton of energy. I'm not really sure. I without getting too far into it, when I was 22 years old, I've always been a really energetic person, but when I was 22 years old, I got swelling of the brain from an accident. And I was sick for a really long time. I was sick for about 10 years total, with complications from what had happened between about age 22 and 32. And in that time, was able to be very successful, but it was a struggle. Like, I mean, I had crushing headaches every single day, and I really didn't feel good. But I think that, probably part of it is my personality, part of it is my upbringing. Of just, being raised by a father who you didn't let anything get you down. Right. But when I finally got well, what I realized, because I hadn't felt normal for 10 years. Yeah. And when I got well, I don't know. I just seized life by the horns every single day. And I want people to feel the same way that I do about how exciting of a world we live in today. And I think that I see so many people who are dragged down by stress, by, the stress of being a business owner, or even being, an employee inside of a business, and sort of how stressful our world can be. And so if my job on this planet is to bring some light and excitement and unicorns and rainbows to people's lives and then help them live their dream. I mean, I think that that's the thing that I love the most about my job is that I get to help these other business owners. I get to live my dream because I get to make my own schedule and do my own thing, sort of. I still work 16 hours a day, but I mean, I get to live this life of sort of life on my own terms. And I also get to help other people do the same. And that's really what drives me every day, is just being able to help these other business owners and these other people have joy in their lives, because it is such a short life. And you never know when it can be taken away from you. And I experienced that, and so I live every day like there's no tomorrow.
That's awesome. And you really do. I mean, the energy that comes from you, you don't leave your presence without feeling like a little bit of empowerment, or maybe
unicorns and rainbows.
Yeah, little unicorns and rainbows. I mean, it's awesome. And I know sometimes that's hard for people to swallow. It's kind of funny. It's like, right. Some people just don't understand that piece of it all. Like, why are you so happy?
You. I mean, it's the same thing. Like, we've got that same sort of magnetic personality. But I think that also, one of the things for people that don't have these kind of personalities like you and I have, because we do both have very big personalities and we are sort of happy, positive people. And, my sister's always kind of grumpy at me about it. She's like, how are you always so optimistic? But you don't have to be this magnetic type of personality. You can be an introvert and still have this kind of, conversation around social capital and be able to get out and network. It's just a matter of the same conversation that I've had with both of these designers is like, how can we do this so that it feels authentic to you? Just getting out and meeting people and being a good person and helping. I mean, so I think that part of what it is really tapping into what feels natural to you. Some people are great salespeople. Some people are just good at helping. But what feels natural to you? What makes you feel good? And then use that to figure out that kind of Trojan horse with other people.
Yeah, that's huge. And with having all the background and the experience that you have in helping businesses really be able to bring those three pieces, that traditional, digital, and in-person marketing kind of together, do you have any advice for the listeners or the audience that would sort of, if they're in this position where they're saying, okay, how do I grow my influence? How do I build more social capital or more social value in my network? What would you give them a couple of tips or tricks that you think can be practically applied?
Yeah, I think that one of the most important and continuously overlooked things is strategic partnerships, especially for business owners. You think about, as a business owner, I can sit here and I can think about the other industries that cross over into my industry that I could potentially find partners that could introduce me to potential clients, right? So just on a pure business development strategy standpoint. So, in the design industry, there's interior designers. Well, they can partner with subcontractors. They can partner with kitchen designers. They can partner with furniture companies. They can partner with all of these other businesses that have similar demographics that they're selling to, and, have an event, feature them on your social media, very simple things that create these kind of give-take relationships that I think that those strategic partnerships are something that's totally overlooked. And so to me, it's just kind of sitting down and saying, what are the 10 businesses that surround my business that could potentially bring in some potential clients someday, right? Not going into that relationship thinking, I want your clients, but going into that relationship and saying, how can we help each other to get more reach, to just, to get my brand out there a little bit further and a little bit wider. I think that the other really important tip is having a very clear story about who you are and why you're doing what you're doing, not what you're doing, not what you're providing, not what your service is, what your product is, but why. And people connect with that why. I mean, it's Simon Sinek is obviously the guru on
right.
why, but there really is something to it. And I think that in this kind of, world where you're constantly getting shouted at on social media and sold. And I think that dialing into why you're doing what you're doing is critical.
That's awesome advice. And you're right. Partnerships is huge. I mean, the power of our alliance, and I think I agree with you. I think it's a very underserved piece of our business in a lot of ways. I was just talking to someone about throwing an event, and it's like, we can throw a $15,000 party. And if we have 10 of us, we can each pay $1,250 bucks or whatever and have a $15,000 party. And or $1,500, whatever that comes out to, but and share that, and each of us bringing our own network is beneficial for each person in it. And yet, instead of having maybe 100 people from my network, we can have 1,000 people by every person bringing theirs. And there's so much power in that. I really love that you brought that up, because I think that's where we are really stronger together than we are on our own.
Absolutely. And I think that, and sometimes these things work really well, and sometimes you like put it together and you think it's going to be great and it flops and you're like, okay, well, let's try another.
Again.
But I think that that's probably the third piece of advice that I have is just tenacity. Like, not everything is going to work. Not every coffee that you have is going to be great. Some of them are going to be awkward. Some of them are, going to be people that only want something from you and you give, and then they don't give back. But the important part is to not focus on the things that didn't work well. It's just to learn from those, right? Like, don't see that as a failure. See that as, I learned something, I met someone, this happened, this worked, let's move on to the next thing. Constantly just kind of tweaking as you go. I mean, like, I'm always just kind of like looking around and sort of on top and below and around the sides and trying to figure out, okay, so what was really good about this? What didn't work? And then how can we make more good happen out of this type of tactic? But really, the long-term game is where it's at. I mean, none of this stuff happens quickly. We think that because, we live in this digital world where everything is at the touch of a button, that relationship should be the same way, that I should connect with this person and then automatically get 3 clients. But the reality is that, anything in this world is going to take 2 to 3 years to develop. But starting somewhere and having the vision, having the willingness to just continue to keep going with it is the thing that's really going to make it solid and stick.
That's great advice, and so true. It takes time, and trust takes time, but it can be lost in an instant. It takes a long time to build, but can be lost.
Lost in an instant, exactly. Which is why continuing to provide genuine value, I think, is the most important thing that we can do. So.
And you're obviously absolutely a pro at relationships, and anyone who has the opportunity to meet you, it doesn't take long to figure out why and how you're so engaging. But can you tell us a little bit about maybe how relationships have been critical to your success?
Mm-hmm. I mean, relationships have been everything in my success, truthfully. I mean, the relationship that I had with my very first client was an architecture firm in Boulder. I had, sat next to the principal at, I think, an ASAD awards banquet when I was first starting out at the magazine when I was 27. Started my agency back in Denver in, I think it was about 10 years later, probably. And, this client and I, we just we were buddies, we went skiing every once in a while but didn't really have a relationship other than the fact that we sent each other Christmas cards every year. It was kind of random. And when I got started, I called him up and I said, hey, starting this agency, you're one of my favorite architecture firms. Would you be willing to do this? I'll work for you for free for 3 months. And then would you refer me to a couple of other people that might be interested as well? And with that one relationship, that set off my entire company.
Wow.
And, and I think that it was a gamble, absolutely. But at the same time, I look back on it now and I'm like, yeah, that was actually really smart. I just kind of thought about it. My mentor had mentioned it. She was like, go work for free for somebody and show them what you have. And in relationships, like every single I'm not every single client, but I would say 80% of our clients have come off of referrals from great relationships. And it wasn't even necessarily from referrals from clients. It was referrals from advertising people, or it was referrals from somebody who heard about us who knows somebody who has worked with us. And so, those relationships have been hugely critical to our success.
That's so awesome. And I just give you serious props for taking that leap back, 5 years ago.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure it was around that time that you were throwing that event with that architect. Yeah. And that event has gone on to become, you were like kind of the catalyst of that. And it has gone on to take on a life of its own. And it's really, I imagine it's fun to watch it and its progression in that way.
It is. And it's very much in that same vein of like, let's get 12 people in the room to spend $1,500 a piece and throw a $15,000 party. It was that exact same concept. And it worked. I mean, it worked beautifully. It's on, I think we started in 2014. So it's on its 5th year now. And it's been really fun to watch it grow.
You brought in sponsors like us, and we're still sponsoring. So, exactly. That's a lot of fun. I would love to know now kind of where you are now. I know you're involved in a few things. You've got you've got so much. So can you just kind of catch us up and tell us a little bit about what you're doing now?
Absolutely. So with Annabel Media, what we are starting and what we're launching over the next year is actually a consulting program. It's something that I've really seen a niche in the marketplace. So with traditional Annabel Media clients, it's a monthly retainer, year-long contract. And what we've really found is that a lot of companies, especially small businesses, that monthly retainer can feel cumbersome. I mean, it's $3,000 a month, $2,500 a month, and that's a lot of money for a small business that is kind of constantly in cash flow flux. But we also know that most companies, not even most, all companies need these communication strategies in place to be successful anymore, because you can't just buy an ad in a magazine and have a successful business. And so what we did is we sort of saw that gap in the marketplace between companies that couldn't afford retainers at all, but still needed help, and companies that could afford retainers. And those were the ones that were, making their way up the ladder. So what we did is we created this consulting program based off of all of our best practices on retainer clients that spends between 4 and 6 months with a client. We give them all of the tools that they need to be able to market their company. So we write their social media strategy. We do their brand messaging, their voice. We'll rewrite their website if we need to. We'll redo their website if we need to. Putting together newsletter strategies, blog strategies, et cetera, and then putting it all together in a really simple format that they can then manage it in-house. So, we sort of see this as companies having an assistant that can, do the social media, but maybe doesn't really understand how to tell a story or do it creatively. So we kind of come in and put all of the parameters in place and all the best practices in place, make it idiot proof, like plug and play. This is exactly what it should look like. This is what it should say. Here's your topic calendar. And then also, extending out into business development tactics. I mean, so it's really this robust kind of marketing education, teaching a man to fish, right?
Yeah.
And then once the company is done with the consulting program, they can stay on with Annabel Media at a very low retainer every month, where we come in and we, do reporting, and we meet with them once a month and say, okay, how's this going? Here's some more ideas. So kind of staying involved as we can, but really allowing those businesses to be able to do it themselves, which has been proven hugely successful so far. It's been really great. So we're excited to expand that. Yeah. And then I have another company called Tara, which is a women's leadership and entrepreneur network. And it really was born out of this idea of, we've got to get people back in the room together. We've got to get people networking and talking to each other again. And there's a lot of people that are starting to understand that this digital ecosystem that we've created is wonderful. And I think that there's so much leverage that can be had off of digital, but at the same time, it's this in-person interaction. It's these personal connections that we've got to get back. And so Tara was really crafted to do that, but really focusing it around education, accountability, and bringing women together in a way that feels really dynamic and exciting. So.
Oh my gosh, it's awesome. And in the show notes, we will have all of your contact information,
Cool.
how to get a hold of you. And so if anybody has any questions and wants to reach out to you directly, we will have all of that in the show notes for them. You have been such a blessing and such a great guest. And I'm so thankful for the insight that you've given us. Do you have any kind of final thoughts that you'd like to share?
I think that the only final thought that I would share with anybody is just this constant bug in your ear to just get out there and do it. Get out there. Don't make an excuse to not go to an event. Don't make an excuse to not have a coffee. Don't make an excuse to not help someone. I mean, obviously, if you're strapped for time, like all of us are, be judicious about where you're spending it. But I think that really so much of the challenge that we run into is ourselves getting in our own way. Just me mentally roadblocking things. And I'm just as much a culprit of it as anybody else. I'm the first person to be like, oh, I'm tired. I don't want to go to that event. But I really think that when you have that thought, have the next thought of, no, let's go. I'll give it 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And again, you never know who you're going to run into or what you're going to find. So.
That's great final thoughts. And true, I mean, it's funny, you say 15 minutes, that's it. And before you know it, it's like, damn, I've been here an hour. I got to get out of here,
Get out of here, exactly.
That's awesome. Well, Kate, thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing your insight with us. I look forward to having you back again.
Absolutely. It was great. And I'm here for any advice for anybody that's out there listening. I'm always up for a cup of coffee and a conversation. So happy to help. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Thanks so much, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Thank you. See you soon.
Yeah. Sounds good. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That's all for this episode of Social Capital Expert. Please visit socialcapitalexpert.com for show notes, additional episodes, and to see who will be visiting us next on the show. Also, be sure to check out our upcoming Social Capital Mixers. These are events where we can connect in person to build social capital. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to having you join us for the next episode.